Okay, once more, I swear this time I'm actually going to play the game a little bit. So here we are. I'll just take a minute more to admire this nice opening area. You can see it's a bit like Doom. You get this nice chaos that builds up after a fight, weapons and such strewn around, and they all bounce in that similarly wuxia way, and even when I pick them up, they do that, and again, it's very what you see, what you get. A thing physically drops onto the ground and you can pick it up and things can happen, like say, weapons can be blasted off that cliff or whatever. And another thing I just wanted to show off because it's nice is you may have seen me shoot this thing down as well, and it crashes over here, just bounces and lands very solidly. I can kind of punt it around because everything is very bouncy and physical, and that's just pure Halo. And just to show off some more awful taste, let me hit you with this, I'm sorry. Isn't that just hideous? And the shape of it no longer visually makes sense, and it just doesn't really track with what you're looking at either. Like, look at where the sparks go and where they don't. They mapped a different shape onto the same physical object in the game space, which I think is so absurdly stupid. I can't understand how it was considered acceptable, frankly. Like, you aren't going to be shooting the wings of this much, but still, just why would they even do that? Like, it's designed to be a distinct thing, and like, they didn't just like paint disgusting over-designed texture onto it. They actually basically took the design and said like, no, Bungie were wrong. It looks like this now. It's fixed. It's better, like our cliff face with this retarded moss texture all over it and so on. It's very obnoxious. But again, I really love this open area. This is just really nice space. They really spoil us here with, even if there's no real tactical possibilities involving this space, we aren't going to get into a gunfight over here because there's so much stuff and it all happens over there and then we go up there. It's very nice that they made this, both because it looks nice and, again, spoiled is the word that comes to mind. I think that there's a certain, in games and certain other things, there's a kind of luxury that comes from excess, which is not value for time, but a sense of scale, that there's more stuff going on than you could meaningfully engage with. A friend of mine is currently playing Yakuza 0, and he's described this feeling to me where he has no guide or anything, he's just playing it, moving around, doing stuff, and the amount of stuff in that game, if you play it kind of what people would call casually now, which means basically not having your hand held and treating it like a kind of movie where you push buttons, everything is there in an order to be powered through because you're some kind of neurotic obsessed with completion. Sorry, that's a tangent where I'm going. If a game has loads of stuff and you aren't determined to do all of it, the sense that there is more there than you could engage with is a very nice one. It's a sense of scale you can't quantify. And I said nothing would spill over down here, but look at this, a gun actually was dropped by the pilot of that machine I shot down, and it landed over here, which I think is quite funny, and maybe a point against all that praise I was leveraging before. I'm not certain, but maybe this level of water is treated as a visual effect and the actual floor is here. I honestly don't know. I imagine it may have actually been on the very edge of it. I'm sure if we were actually in co-op, me and another person, we could look at ourselves and see if the Master Chief's feet sink in. It's strange because I actually am a physical object in the world, even though I can't see it. I make a splash when I jump in water, which is very strange in effect, where my legs aren't rendered, but they're actually there in the logic of the game. Or maybe they just coded that splash to appear. Either way, it feels physically present, and that's ultimately what matters. But enough of that, I'm just saying, again, we're just spoiled for space in this level, and the idea is not that, oh, well, it's more value for money, it takes longer. No, I'm explicitly talking about space which you do not use, which has no practical purpose. That's a detail I've always appreciated in a game. That's how you make something feel bigger. Like, Far Cry 5 is not a game which feels big to me, Far Cry 4, whatever, those pieces of junk, because everything has a discrete purpose, which means that you aren't really playing in a big world, you are playing in a game with like you are playing a fixed, defined game that just has loads of levels which are all really small and you walk between them. Every area is some kind of thought out space in which you do a very specific thing. There is no just scatter of stuff for the sake of it. It's kind of a lost art, just making stuff and having it be there. Everything is very kind of neurotically fussed out for completion in new games. It's got some kind of purpose or it's not there. But that's a point I'd like to try out. I actually want to get into Doom modding at the moment just to try to explore this principle of basically making massive amounts of space and not using most of it and seeing if I can get a feeling I like out of that. If I do make that, I'll probably link it on this channel eventually, but there's a lot of stuff I might eventually do here, but at the moment I just want to talk about this and indulge myself, and yes, just more nice open space. And if you really just spin around Sound of Music your way through here, it's really just nice in every direction how even if you are kind of cued very well in a way that became a meme like 10 years later to do in a way which tells you you're doing it, I'm directing, like the meme. Like, a Naughty Dog game has like ridiculous shining lights from the sky pointing, diegetically to tell you where to go, like, oh, it's a natural cue. No, it's not. Like, this game was doing natural cues way before that was a thing anyone was thinking. Much better. Not saying it invented it, but it does it very well. People just kind of instinctively cross that bridge and power up here and don't really realize that, like, there's big amounts of space on either side, and without being told, they know not to waste time on it if they want to get to the next gunfight or whatever. And if you're an idiot like me and you just want to mess around looking at all of the nice open space, it's there for you to just admire. It's scenery you can touch, which makes it feel much more real than, a very elaborate skybox. This game does have a very nice skybox, by the way, which looks worse in the remake. Don't ask me how. Well, I actually will elaborate on how in a bit if you'll indulge me again, but anyway, as I was saying, yes, it's like, for example, Call of Duty World at War is a game that gets a lot of credit for the amount of incidental scene detail it has, but what bothers me about those games is that the detail you can't touch. It's not what you see is what you get. You're in a very narrow corridor, like the space between these rocks, and powering along through that and like over a fence which you can't jump no matter how you angle yourself. There'll be like a wider battle going on, and if I could just walk into that, I would love the Call of Duty campaigns, but I can't. It's very much like, it's basically an extremely elaborate painted skybox which extends almost 360 degrees around you while you're just on this treadmill doing very limited actions. But again, I said I would talk about the sky briefly, and again, I think the point is just horror vacui. Even if there are more stars on this, it feels more sparse and distant. This feels like a very close, almost claustrophobic sky, like the coloring, the physicality of the ring by contrast. I don't know how they did it, but it feels different. It all feels like it's bearing down on me. It's very close. There is no real sense of space above me. Everything is claustrophobic about this bearing in of detail, the bright exposed color, saturated colors and everything. And it reminds me of how space looks in a lot of anime. I may have brought that up before, like Gunbuster and Legend of the Galactic Heroes have brilliant space where it's very black or blue with just dots of stars in the distance. It feels very empty in a way which I like, and which I think a lot of Western visual media frankly just doesn't do. It's all colorful swirls and stuff. They seem to have an aversion to the lonely vision of space, but that's something Halo Combat Evolved I think does well, even when you're on the ground or whatever. It's lonely, expansive space. It's spiritually a very cool thing, which I'm very down with. I think it's a very kind of nerdy white person's vision of what's cool, just this massive open space as opposed to this busy, never leaving you alone, never letting you breathe flood of jobs and stimulation. Very open, I like this. And this whole area, it's just, even here, this is a hallway, but we're just spoiled for space again. And okay, we've actually got some plot happening again, and Here is a very nice dynamic scene. We're on normal, so I don't need to hustle. Here is a two-way fight now, or three if you count me. Humanity is still alive on this ring. They didn't all die with me and my bad pilot. And I've got to save these guys here, and I will actually show them fighting in a moment. You saw a few rounds coming in surely there, but I was kind of fussing to save them.
Good to see you, sir. Welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party. It's me and the Marines. There they are.
We called for evac, but until you showed up, I thought we were cooked.
Don't worry, Sergeant. We'll stay here.
This is a very cool sequence now. We've got 4 Marines, I think, and 2 crew members up there, and we're being attacked on all sides by the aliens, and there's a couple of spots in this level where I'll be able to really show you the pretty good nuance and liveliness of how the 2 different sides, they really come out best, how detailed they are in their interactions when they're fighting each other. I'll be able to show you a bit of that and just more aliens, more stuff. Bungie were really, again, the thought is like, I may have touched on it briefly, a sense that, a thought that fascinates me is that a lot of things that games do, they haven't actually been surpassed in for like 20 years or longer. Like in the sense of like, meaningfully is more being done than was in the past. I think Halo Combat Evolved has some of the best AI is the term now. That's very loaded now in the age of chatbots and so on. But, you know, just in the sense of, I try to describe things without using the accepted terminology to shake things up. Without saying AI, just the characters in this game, the actors, they act their parts better and more dynamically than ones in games which have come out since, I think. Really, even games that are coming out like right now, the shooters and so on, they still have guys who run around doing their own things like the Marines in this game, but are they really better? Does it feel like we've had 20 years of progress on these guys right here? Like, look at these guys, they talk, they tilt their heads to look at things, they comment on what's going on, they have very lively and entertaining voice lines, very excited and happy to be there, actors who are having a good time, very lively script. It's just, they're a very felt presence, even in a way that, like, not too long after this, like the Call of Duty 4s and 5s when I started playing those games, they feel like a massive step down from this in the sense that the different soldiers you're fighting with on your side and so on, their presence is very two-dimensional. They feel weightless, their interactions are very limited, they just fire guns and stand in set points and die a bunch. And, you know, they say things but the sound mixing is bad and drowned out, and their physical presence is very weightless. This dude didn't make it, sorry bro. But yeah, just, again, the comment on Wuxia with the physics, it goes for everything down to, like, the performances of the actors. They are very exaggerated and over the top, is a point I'd like to raise, that it's very hard not to notice them. They're very kind of mugging you for attention, but it's very entertaining and lively, and it's hard to not, like, to play this game without noticing they're there. But, like, who remembers anything interesting happening with the soldiers in a Call of Duty campaign? That simply never happens. They're just basically props about as lively as this tree here, but even less relevant. Like, I can throw a grenade that'll bounce off that thing. What's going to happen with the soldier in a Call of Duty campaign? He's just a complete non-entity. He's very boring. Sorry, but I was going to let some stuff play out. I might let this last wave of aliens kind of have an honest go at the Marines, who I think have pulled back to this place up here with the crew, and they'll actually have a solid go at trying to rush up and get them while the crew shoot down, and that can be interesting to look at. There they go, diving around and shooting. I love that dive animation. It's so superfluous in the sense of, like, it rarely saves them. They are scripted to do it when a grenade lands near them. Does it ever save them? I couldn't tell you, but it's very wuxia. It's very... They react to everything in a way that's not just potentially practical for, like, you know, they're meant to be soldiers who want to live, but it's also just... It gives an exaggerated sense of liveliness when everything has, like, a 200% reaction, like, you know, bodies get launched to a silly degree by explosions, that kind of thing. Come on, you. And, you know, a Marine doesn't just, like, run for cover. He does that very big, heavy roll. That guy just threw himself off the edge and they scream with their funny accents, and yeah, look at them go. They actually put up a good fight on normal. Oh, sorry about that guy. Just as I was telling him he was doing a good job. Oh, well, I got that one. So, that was hopefully somewhat interesting to observe, and yes, that's again my point. Progress is a point I want to make all throughout Halo. I really get the impression that while playing this game, if you're not a very superficial and thoughtless person, you should be fairly regularly struck by an impression that games didn't really get meaningfully better than this, in the sense that, like, this is obviously a better game than GoldenEye, which I think was always kind of silly how praised that one was. Like, Perfect Dark, obviously, but even The World is not enough. On the Nintendo 64 were far more interesting games, in my opinion. And you could really feel the progress when this was new, and that sense of progress is something I very viscerally remember dying off as I was experiencing games growing up, that, it felt like anything was going to be possible a few years after Halo, and, little did I know 20 years later I'd be coming back and thinking, yeah, they really didn't get better than this, did they? But, again, just why I bring up such weird points like how much I admire the grass, it's just, we never really learned to quantify what made a game like this so good, and I think that's why we were able to lose what made it good. That's again another nice physical detail, that the Marines actually pile into that ship and you can see them sitting there and getting smaller as it flies away. That's just a very nice detail, I think, and we can see it flying over the edge, and there's another little exaggerated 200% detail. We go over that bump with our crazy flying moon physics, and my guy does a big yell and raises his arm. Everything is over the top, but not in a way that's like wacky, like you're meant to laugh. It's over the top in the sense of like, it's making sure you don't miss anything. Everything just reacts on a super real level, which is necessary to compensate for the lack of viscerality, which I think is innate in a virtual space experience, whatever you want to call this. Things become more real just by being a bit extreme, I think, but it's a very kind of careful balancing act. And now I'm being told to go, but I'm going to indulge myself a bit and just drive this, and again, wuxia is the word. Like, how do I describe the physics of the Warthog? Is it silly? I wouldn't say so. Is it bouncy? Yes, but the essential word is exaggerated. Just, again, it has to sell that we're traversing the ground. On one hand, the exaggeration, it's a way to kind of safely clear everything for Bungie while they're working out their 3D collision and stuff, just make everything really fly off the ground rather than just hug it in a boring way and look like it's gliding, or, I think this is probably an easier way to code a car, to make it just kind of bounce a lot and not compromise its 3D physicality. And also, I think, happy accident or very well calculated, thoughtful move, the excessive bounciness and weight and flight of this thing makes it feel like a 3D object again. I feel like I could reach into the screen and touch this thing in a way that I don't with, say, a car in Battlefield. Like, if you've driven a Humvee in one of those games, you can, I'm pretty sure, push a button and go third person like this. The way that they hug the ground very faithfully doesn't feel real in a very odd sense. Like, again, these things have never been quantified, so I've got to kind of reach for my language, but this feels like a physical object in a world of physical objects, in a way that, the high fidelity, everything looks real, everything is relatively grounded in how it reacts. Call of Duty or Battlefield men and their cars and such. There is a kind of fake weightlessness to that, the superficiality of the fidelity, which does not really match and does not feel visceral, whereas this, again, happy accident or genius calculation that wasn't repeated, this is the very real era. I call this kind of the intermediate era of first-person shooters and action games in general. You could also call it the kind of happy balance era, or the era of extreme physicality. Another game I've talked about and written about a bit, haven't talked about on YouTube, is Far Cry 1, which I see as the kind of end of this era. That one feels a lot like Halo in many ways. It's actually where I first had the thought of grass and the Death Stranding comparisons and so on, but Far Cry 1 is kind of, in my mind, the last new feeling game that has this kind of like lumpy, blocky terrain, which is one-to-one, what you see is what you get, and it was starting to make the Battlefield mistake with its cars, so that's where the comparison gets interesting, I think. Far Cry 1 does people moving on foot just like Halo, if not a little bit better. It's very, very good. But it does vehicles much, much worse, in my opinion. And if I were to one day maybe gather some footage and put that side by side, I could show you what I mean, but for now I can show you the Halo Warthog, and for Far Cry, if you've played it, you can think about what I've said, and if you haven't, just kind of take my word on it, or even look up some footage. You're on YouTube, you could. And for now, that's all I'll indulge myself with on the Warthog. We have to go through this scary cave, and apparently it's not a natural formation. Yep, that's a meme. I never found the line that absurd. It's just some basic reasoning, and why shouldn't she explain that? Maybe she's just bored, I don't know. And here's a kind of plot point. This is Bungie kind of covering their asses because the story is a bit sparse. Cortana knows everything because she can just read the aliens' internet, and she knows everything they're saying. Their code is completely broken, or they have no code, she even said, so there's our gigantic tactical edge. That's how we know the perfect fights to pick. That's how, like, the Master Chief and like 100 guys in boonie hats are able to beat this massive alien army. We can just read all of their stuff in that one throwaway line. And here comes a big fancy fight. I will show you the Warthog fight next time, I think. I will call this video here before the file gets too big on me. Thank you again for watching, and I hope this was interesting.